Bernays set out to experiment with the minds of the popular classes.
Wars were fought, and millions of people were brainwashed.
In short, to sell Mr. Butler to the voters. You'll find that the purpose of most propaganda is to persuade people to believe something, to do something, or to buy something.
So you could walk into a grocery store and buy these two items without thinking about it. And it's the not thinking about it that matters the most. There's one invisible man at the center of brainwashing millions of people over the last century. Eddie gets his start doing PR locally for performers. His first success is selling out a risque play about herpes and syphilis that typically wouldn't have even been allowed to be shown, let alone selling out. Cleverly, Eddie had used his position as co-editor of a medical review paper to write editorials which were endorsed by physicians who supported educating the public on STDs. The play is attended by folks like the Roosevelts and the Rockefellers, putting Eddie's abilities on the map. He spends the next few years working with musicians and performers, turning each one into overnight sensations. But it's World War I that galvanizes Eddie into the self-proclaimed title, Father of Public Relations, thanks to his volunteer work. Now, this isn't your typical soup kitchen volunteer work. This is working with the CPI, the Committee on Public Information, established by President Wilson. The CPI was there to help keep the public informed of what was happening in the war. Eddie's role focuses on getting public support, not just stateside, but abroad. He organizes recruitment events and frequent public speeches, like the 4-Minute Men.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have just received information that there is a German spy among us. A German spy is watching us. He is around here somewhere, reporting on you and me.
These men would appear at events all over the country, each reciting speeches carefully written and vetted by Eddie's team. More than 75,000 citizens took part in the 4-Minute Men program, resulting in over 400 million listeners over the course of the war. The CPI quickly expands their scope. They aren't just reporting the news, they're the central hub for controlling the narrative of the way America and much of the world experiences the war.
Ladies and gentlemen, here I am, back of a stone wall that adjoins Mr. Wilmer's garden.
His work as a public agent for performers gave him a path, but it was the war that showed Eddie what was possible when employing Freud's psychoanalytical tactics to brainwash a nation. Oh, that's right. Eddie is Sigmund Freud's nephew, and not the distant kind of nephew. In many ways, he was more of a father to Eddie than Eddie's own father. Sigmund Freud is responsible for much of how we view the discipline of psychology today. His work centers around our unconscious mind and how our memories and thoughts dictate our behavior. While Freud can be criticized for his lack of empirical evidence, it's his nephew Eddie that puts his work to the test. He shows us what's possible when you combine Freud's theories and Eddie's position of influence. After the war, Eddie takes on any client with the cash to hire him. He helps a book publisher sell more books by convincing home developers to build bookshelves into key areas of the home. He triples Procter & Gamble's ivory soap sales by hosting a national soap carving contest. 23 million kids take part. Now, increasing book sales and getting kids to like bathing with soap seems like it's for the greater good, right? Well, sure. But like I said, if you had the cash to hire him, Eddie didn't care what you were selling.
If you want better taste from your cigarette, Lucky Strike is the brand to get. It's toasted to give you the best taste yet. It's the toasted.
Eddie has a simple strategy he employs with nearly every client. Attach private interest to a public cause. In this way, he could Trojan horse any product into the hands and homes of millions of people who weren't just willing consumers, but they felt like they were fundamentally making the world a better place by buying these products. He does this expertly with his next client, Lucky Strike's cigarettes. Back from the war, men had switched from chewing tobacco and smoking pipes to cigarettes. Men everywhere were smoking. Eddie rolls out a 3-stage strategy. First, he has the top interior designers release the season's designs. They included kitchen cabinets with special places to keep your cigarettes. These ideas quickly trickle down and are adopted by local designers, who ensure every home they work on has them installed. At the same time, Eddie's team shares the weight loss results of cigarettes to popular women's magazines. Within 6 months, cigarettes can be found on the dessert menu of every fancy hotel. It works. Women across the nation are smoking, but only indoors. The women's liberation movement is sweeping the nation, and a parade has been carefully orchestrated on Easter Sunday. Prominent women to be in attendance will light a cigarette, or, as the newspapers will describe in the following days, they lit their torches of freedom. Women everywhere were smoking, but in stage 3, Eddie ensures they're smoking Lucky Strikes. The final touch. A grand ball is organized with socialites from all over New York at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. The theme? The color of green found on every carton of Lucky Strike cigarettes. With Eddie working his magic, Lucky Strike sales go from $158 million a year to more than $500 million. In today's money, that's about $8.5 billion. Earlier I mentioned bacon and bananas. Surely those can't be as contentious as cigarettes, right? Well, in the 1930s, breakfast is coffee and a roll. Always light. But then a dietary physician concludes that a heavy breakfast will provide a person with more caloric energy than a light breakfast. It's important to note that this doctor was on Eddie's payroll. Eddie sends a survey to thousands of doctors. 4,500 doctors respond with support for this vague and technically truthful statement. Every other question on the survey is ignored when Eddie himself writes a headline to be found on newspapers across the country. Physicians urge Americans to eat a heavy breakfast to improve their health. And the first recommendation of what meal to have is a plate of bacon and eggs. More than 100 years later, bacon is still a staple of breakfast. But what happens when there's more at stake than the breakfast menu? Take a banana.
We traveled through 3 provinces and saw whole valleys empty of humanity with crops abandoned. 35,000 Indians have fled into neighboring Mexico, 9,000 of whom have arrived since Rios Montt came to
The
power.
United States is a fifth column if there ever was one. It is far better organized than were the Nazis in occupied countries prior to their capitulation.
To most people, not particularly special. In the mid-20th century, these were popular and readily accessible fruits, thanks to the United Fruit Company. The United Fruit Company had built a behemoth of a company on the backs of underpaid laborers in Central America. In fact, they happened to have the largest non-military navy in the world, just to ship bananas. During World War II, they actually lent ships to the American military. But a newly elected government in Guatemala was looking to take land back and redistribute it to the poor. Some of this land was United Fruit Company weren't even using. And rather than coming to the negotiating table with the Guatemalan government, they turned to Eddie, a PR guy. Now, thanks to his geopolitical PR work during World War I, Eddie was eager to apply his learnings to private industry. Armed with a near infinite budget from United Fruits, he started organizing trips for journalists from prominent publications in America to come down and experience a changing Guatemala. What they didn't realize is that every single thing they did and saw was carefully crafted by Eddie, all designed to result in a single headline: Communist Guatemala. Thanks to the ongoing Cold War, the label of communist was unacceptable, and the US had no choice but to step in and protect a newfound interest in United Fruit. The CIA launched PB Success, which included psychological warfare, propaganda, and military action. Shortly after, the democratically elected government stepped down to make way for the CIA-appointed military dictatorship, thus protecting the United Fruit Company. A lifetime of brainwashing and international political meddling, all of them meticulously preserved by Eddie. Every letter of communication between him and the most powerful people in the world, all published to the Library of Congress upon his death in 1995 at 103 years old. It's unclear if releasing a lifetime of correspondence with presidents and CEOs to manipulate the public was his ego looking to show the world what he had accomplished in secret, or perhaps he was lifting the veil to show others that not all is as it seems. That sudden agreement of anything by a large group of people should be thoughtfully considered before throwing your own weight behind it. Either way, we have it now. And if nothing else, it's an unbelievable story, demonstrating the impact that a single individual can have on the world.